नमो विष्णुपदय कृष्णपृष्ठय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामी नामिने नमो विष्णुपदय कृष्णपृष्ठय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवती पश्चात्देशकारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद 같이 니타이 Gauranga 니타이 Gauranga
prayers to our teachers, acharyas, get their blessings to speak today in spiritual subject matters. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So first, beg the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis that I may be able to speak properly on our Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta, philosophical conclusions that are given to us by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada, and our spiritual masters. I wanted to read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 11. And for those who don't know what Srimad Bhagavatam is, there's a book collection right here. It is also known as the Bhagavat Purana. And along with Bhagavad Gita, it's our main source for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So verse 11, Canto 1, Chapter 2, states, Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan nityashabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there's no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So, understanding this verse, it's very beautiful purport from Srila Prabhupada, talking about the three aspects of the divine: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And us living in Denver or in Colorado, we're able to see the mountains. So we're actually able to understand these three phases of the divine, these three aspects. Krishna. So we're able to understand these three aspects in a very practical way by looking at the mountains. And sometimes when we look at the mountains, there's a haze in front of the mountains, some type of clouds or haze, and you can barely see the outline of the mountains. Sometimes we can't even see the mountains from long distance, we just see the haze. And that's likened to seeing the Brahman effulgence of the Lord. Now when you get a little bit closer, and you're able to pierce through the haze, you're able to see clearly the outlines of the mountains. This is like the second aspect, Paramatma. So Brahman is known in the Upanishads as the effulgence, the bodily rays of the Lord. In a beautiful Upanishad called Sri Upanishad, there's a beautiful prayer where the yogi is praying, "Oh Lord, actually remove the glaring effulgence so that I can see your beautiful face." And then the second phase, Paramatma, where we see the outlines of the mountains a little bit more clear, there's more definition. Paramatma is the aspect of God within everyone's heart, manifestation of God in every single atom and in everyone's heart, as the observer and the witness. And then we get closer to the mountains and you actually go on a hike. You see all kinds of deer, wildlife, birds, trees. Everything's very detailed. And this is likened to the aspect of Bhagavan. So these three features of the absolute truth are actually altogether one. But what happens? Some people start arguing. My perspective of the mountains is actually the absolute truth, where your perspective of the absolute truth, that's wrong. I'm right and you're wrong. And we get into fights over the same absolute truth. Right? We see this all over the world. People get into so many different fights thinking, my way of spiritual life is better than your way. My religion is the best. My spiritual teachers are the best. But when we actually understand what is the truth, what is the absolute truth, we start seeing the essence of religion, the essence of Dharma, which is actually the same throughout all the varieties of religion and spiritual paths. The essence is actually the same. We're all pointing towards the mountains and understanding the mountains. And so in this life, human life actually begins when we want to know the absolute truth. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Human life means to inquire about the absolute truth. I was thinking about that, human life, right? As humans, we have really no predators, nothing really big to worry about. Some years ago, my daughter and I, we were watching Planet Earth. And I remember watching, I can't remember if they're called sea iguanas, but there's some type of iguanas. They're born on this island. As soon as they hatch, as soon as they're born, they have to run like anything to the ocean. Why? Because as soon as they start crawling around, there's all these snakes on the island that's ready just to gobble them up. I was thinking, man, what an existence. I mean, can you imagine being born and then having to like run like anything just to try to live? But we're born, we're raised by parents, we get to go to school, we don't go out of our house and there's any type of bear or mountain lion. Maybe if you live in Colorado mountains, some places you have to be worried about bears and mountain lions. But for the most part, what is human life about? We reduce it to trying to enjoy the matter that's around us. We have a certain amount of senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling. And we use those senses, why? To be happy, right? We don't want to be in pain. Nobody wants pain. And some people think that lack of pain is happiness. But that's a very shallow understanding of pleasure. So, Bhagavad Gita says, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam. When the mind, the chitta, the consciousness is focused so much on bhoga and aishvarya of the world. Bhoga, the pleasure of this world, aishvarya, the opulences of this world, then na samadana vidyate. Right? When we're too much focused, then we start crying like that. We get too much focused and inverted. So in human life, it's meant to experience transcendental understanding, transcendental bliss. And that starts with asking the simple question, what is the absolute truth? And Srimad Bhagavatam is telling us 3 different angles of the absolute truth, and there's disagreement between so many different religions and philosophies. But the essence is one. And to really dive deep into the absolute truth and the human form of life, Srimad Bhagavatam gives us so many beautiful stories. There's a verse that says, Veda Puranam Kavyam Cha Prabhur Mitram Priyevacha. The Vedas, the Upanishads, they teach like a master. You should do this, you should do that. It's very you should do this. I'm demanding that you do this. The Puranas, like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Purana, the Puranas, they teach like a friend, Mitra. When you're in distress, you have a friend that comes and says, oh, I went through the same thing. Let me tell you my story and how I got out of it. And then poetry, Kavyam, teaches like a lover, Priyevacha. Sweet, sweet words, right? With friends, we don't use such beautiful poetry, but in the love life, there's beautiful poetry that comes out in intense feelings. But Bodhiyantiti hi prahus tivrid bhagavatam punaha. Srimad Bhagavatam teaches in all 3 ways. Like a master, like a friend, like a lover. And there's so many beautiful stories in Srimad Bhagavatam that speak about the absolute truth and those who are trying to realize the absolute truth. Those who are really trying to dive into spiritual life. That's what Srimad Bhagavatam is about. The Bhaktas, Bhagavan, and Bhakti, devotional service, or the path, the yogic path of devotion. And so in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a very instructive story for all of us. It's called Gajendra Moksha. And Gajendra, he wasn't even a human being. He was an elephant. So what to speak of human beings realizing the absolute truth, we have here an elephant, but we'll understand what kind of elephant he is. Srimad Bhagavatam, this story, if you can imagine this in your mind, it begins at Trikuta Mountain, the most beautiful mountain that you can imagine. It's so big, it's very luscious, and it's surrounded by an ocean of milk. That's right, an ocean of milk. The mind can hardly take in the ocean of salt water, but Srimad Bhagavatam gives us stories that bring us into different dimensions, different worlds. And so there's this huge mountain that's called Trikuta, and it's surrounded by an ocean of milk. Just that alone is mind-bending. Ocean of milk. How doesn't it curdle? But even more wonderful, the waves, when it touches upon the mountain, what happens? It creates emeralds. Marakata. Beautiful green emeralds. Now, imagine the most beautiful mountain, waves that are white, emeralds. Then there's the most beautiful singing in caves, mantras that are being sung by great rishis and sages, murmuring birds. And then, to top it off, there's beautiful fragrances everywhere, from flowers and from heavenly personalities. This is taking place in the heavenly realm, which is above our realm in a different dimension, a different plane of existence, where all of the heavenly people, just the fragrances of their bodies are intoxicating, right? In this middle realm, this dimension, we have to put stuff on our body to smell good, right? We don't wake up smelling good. At least not me anyway. I don't know about all of you. But just the most extravagant fragrances. And then there's Ritumat Lake, gardens that are within this beautiful mountain, which is even more beautiful than the mountain. This is Varuna's lake, the demigod of the oceans. Ritumat. Ritu, it's a very beautiful Sanskrit word, which means justice or balance. So Ritumat is where everything is at perfect balance. The most beautiful place. It also has the most perfect balance. There's beautiful birds singing. There's all types of date trees, mango trees, any type of fruit trees that you can imagine that's there. So we have the most beautiful setting. And here comes Gajendra, the lord of the elephants, Gajapati. And what is he doing? He's walking through the forest. And as he's walking, all of the beasts, like the lions, the tigers, all of the so-called beasts of the jungle, they're fleeing because this massive elephant, he's Gajendra, he's the king of this forest. He's the king of Ritumat. He's not fearing anything. Everyone's fearing him. Just imagine the most strong personality just walking through. Right? He's not worried about thorns. He's not worried about branches. He's just crushing everything in his path. But the little animals, they actually enjoy Gajendra being around because they have no fear of the bigger animals. And Gajendra, he's so powerful. He's so strong. He has his family. He has his she-elephants. He has nothing to fear. And liquor is actually dripping from his mouth. Actually, bumblebees are drinking that liquor from his mouth like honey. And he's intoxicated. So the most beautiful place, the most strong personality, he goes into this Ritumat garden, goes into the lake, and he refreshingly takes in some water. He's feeling so satisfied. Everybody's playing, spraying water with their trunks. Just the most serene atmosphere. And then, all of a sudden, he's grabbed by a crocodile. And he can't move. Actually, the crocodile drags him into the lake. And they start struggling together. Just a moment ago, he was satisfied and in pleasure. Now he's struggling with the crocodile, and the crocodile is dragging him into the lake. And Gajendra can't do anything. He's looking at his family. He's looking at different friends that are around him. None of them can save him. And he's struggling like anything just to keep up in the lake. Well, the crocodile wants to continually drag him down. And now Gajendra, he's thinking, what am I going to do? For 1,000 years, they battle, struggling, on and on. Even the demigods, they were witnessing this, and they were bewildered. What is happening? How is this elephant not just dead? And as he was being dragged into the water more and more, what was happening? He's an elephant. He's not used to the water. He's used to the land. And he's so powerful on the land. In the water, he's very weak. Srila Prabhupada gives us a very important instruction in the purport to this verse, talking about how we should understand where we need to be in our life to properly fight against the illusory energy. Srila Prabhupada says that taking to Krishna consciousness means war on the illusory energy, declaring war against Maya. And what happens if we're not properly situated? Then we're going to drown in the lake. And so, thinking about our lives, our spiritual life, is the proper setting I'm at, career, partner, everything, is it conducive to spiritual life? And if it's not, we should try to readjust anything in our life so that the crocodile isn't going to just drag us into the lake. So a very instructive purport by Srila Prabhupada. So while he's struggling, Gajendra, he remembers a mantra. And I wanted to read text 33 here. Beautiful, beautiful prayer. So he's struggling, and he remembers. My family can't help me. My wives can't help me. No one can help me except the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so he prays. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly not known to everyone, but he is very powerful and influential. Therefore, although the serpent of eternal time, which is fearful in force, endlessly chases everyone, ready to swallow them, if one who fears the serpent seeks shelter of the Lord gives him protection, for even death runs away in fear of the Lord. I therefore surrender unto him, the great and powerful supreme authority, who is the actual shelter of everyone. So such beautiful imagery and poetry, that time is like a serpent trying to swallow everyone, right? But we think that time isn't affecting us. One day you're thinking you're very young, and then you wake up and you see all these grays on your face, and you're thinking, what has happened to my youthful life? It's the serpent of time. So just as the crocodile is dragging him down, the serpent of time is trying to swallow everyone. And what is this actual shelter? Is the absolute truth, right? In this world, there are so many natural disasters that happen. When a hurricane comes, what can you do? Where's the actual shelter? They tell you just to find shelter somewhere. But what does that actually mean? So the real shelter of everyone is Krishna. And in Bhagavad Gita it says, Chatur vidha bhajante mam janasu kirtanarjuna. Arto jigyasur artarti gyani cha bharatarshava. That those who are pious, sukrita, they'll surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead caused by four ways. Right? Those who are distressed, arta, like Gajendra. He's actually the symbol of one who's distressed, who surrenders to the Lord. And if you're impious, you'll never surrender to the Lord. You'll never seek shelter. But if you're pious and you're in distress, you'll seek shelter of the Lord. Those who are inquisitive, they want to know what is the absolute truth. Why am I suffering? What is spiritual life? They'll seek and they'll seek. And if they have sukrita, if they have good fortune, they'll surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, Aarti, those who want wealth. Right? Those who are pious, we see they want wealth, then they go to church. They enter into some type of religious function where they'll pay a little bit of money so that in return they'll get even more from God. And then finally, the jnanis, those who are actually really desirous of wanting to know the absolute truth. Then they'll surrender to Krishna, is what he says. So here we have Gajendra. He's suffering. And so he ends up chanting a mantra that he remembers. Right? And this is so important for us to take shelter of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has made it so simple for us that if we're in distress, if we want money, if we want to inquire about spiritual life, if we want to know the absolute truth, we have a very simple mantra. Mantra means that which trayate delivers the mana, the mind. So whatever reason you're wanting to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have a mantra. And his mantra that he chanted, it glorifies the Supreme Absolute Truth as the supreme origin, supreme energy, supreme energetic, and transcendental. So the absolute truth, that's Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, is glorified as the supreme origin, the cause of all causes. Karana, sarva karana karana. And everything that we see around us, anything that we can perceive, is actually all the cause of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even ourselves, we have our origin in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the supreme energy. He's the cause and totality of everything. Bahunam jamanam ante gyanavan mam prapadyate. Vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabha. Those who are Mahatmas, and it's very rare to be a Mahatma, but one who has great intelligence. Bahunam janmanam. After many, many births, they come to the realization that Vasudeva sarvam iti. Everything is Vasudev. Everything is Krishna. Now, how is everything Krishna? Aham sarvasya prabhava matta sarvam pravartate. Everything spiritual and material emanates from the Supreme Lord. So we find in religion and philosophy how there's dualists, right? We have the material world, and God is this being that's way up there, and he's separate from the material world. Dualism. Then we have monism. Everything is God. The matter, spirit, everything is God. Even us, we're God. That's what the monists say. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he brings together everything in such a beautiful way. Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. Inconceivably, simultaneously one and different. We have the energy of this material world. That's an emanation from Krishna. And so, in one sense, it is Krishna, but yet it's different from Krishna. We are parts and parcels of Krishna. Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. We're eternal, God is eternal. We're conscious, God is conscious. But Eko Bahunam Yo Vididati Kaman. God is the one who's basically giving all the kama, the pleasure, to all the living entities, taking care of the living entities. The living entity is Anu, and the Lord is Vibhu. And so he glorifies him as the supreme energetic. The Lord creates, annihilates. He's the supreme cause and is transcendental, above everything. So very beautiful prayers by Gajendra. And he even says that it's not easy to understand the Lord. But the Lord is the super soul, the supreme shelter. And in text 20 of chapter 3, Gajendra prays in such a beautiful way. Gajendra prays. Unalloyed devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Lord worship him in full surrender and always hear and chant about his activities, which are most wonderful and auspicious. Thus they always merge in an ocean of transcendental bliss. Such devotees never ask the Lord for any benediction. I, however, am in danger. Thus I pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally existing, who is invisible, who is the Lord of all great personalities, such as Brahma, and who is available only by transcendental bhakti yoga. Being extremely subtle, he is beyond the reach of my senses and transcendental to all external realization. He is unlimited. He is the original cause, and he is completely full in everything. I offer my obeisances unto him. And so he's praying to the Supreme Authority. But there's something very interesting. When you read these prayers, he never mentions the name of the Supreme Authority. And so, never addressing the Supreme Authority by name, he's in distress. He's calling for help. Brahma, Shiva, the other demigods, they say, oh, he hasn't called for us. He didn't address Brahma, the swan carrier. He didn't address Lord Shiva. He didn't address the demigods, so they don't come to help him. But it's very interesting. He's not calling for the demigods. He knows who the Supreme Authority is by qualities, by ontology, but he's not giving a nomenclature. He's not giving a name to the Supreme Authority. But God comes down, wanting to reciprocate with Gajendra. Vishnu comes on the back of Garuda with Sudarshan Chakra. And what does Gajendra do? He says, Bhagavan Namaste, and he takes a lotus flower with his trunk and he lifts it to the sky. Krishna says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. Either leaf, water, but if just a flower, pushpa, if you just take one flower and you offer it to God, no matter what the internals are, just offer that flower to God, God will reciprocate with you. So sometimes we see devotees when they're chanting Hare Krishna in Kirtan, they raise their hands in the air just like Gajendra. Right? The mudra, everybody wants to know different types of mudras, but the mudra of surrender is raising your arms up and chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Gajendra offering the lotus flower, Vishnu cuts off the head of the crocodile. Now, why did all of this happen? Right? The crocodile is dead, and Gajendra is saved. Is this a dualistic story? No, actually the crocodile, he was cursed to become a crocodile. Some time ago, we mentioned hoo-hoo and ha-ha, Gandharvas who sing in the heavenly realm. Hoo-hoo and ha-ha, it's their names, celestial singers. Hoo-hoo was actually in a lake one time, and Devala Rishi, he was getting out of the lake, and Hoo-hoo, he grabbed onto Devala Rishi's foot, and Devala Rishi turned around and said, I curse you to become a crocodile. But because Devala Rishi, he's a great sage, his curse turned out to be a great benediction. He was killed by Krishna. Krishna, whatever the absolute truth does, is absolute. And so, this crocodile, Hoo-hoo, he actually became a devotee of Krishna. He went back home, back to Godhead, to the transcendental realm. So not that the crocodile was punished and didn't receive anything, but he actually was liberated. And Gajendra, he received moksha also. He received Svarup Shakti. The liberation of Svarup, getting the same kind of body as God. There's different types of liberations that are mentioned, and one of them is to actually have the same type of body as God in the Vaikuntha realm, the spiritual world. And how did Gajendra become an elephant? He was actually a great king named Indrajumna. Those who know Indrajumna Maharaj, he was actually a great worshipper of Lord Jagannath. He built a great temple for Lord Jagannath. But Indrajumna, the king, he gave up his kingdom. He wanted to go to the forest and live like a great sage. And so he was meditating on the absolute truth. And when he was meditating on the absolute truth, what happened? Agastya Rishi. He was a very powerful rishi. Any of you know who he is? He has so much power he's able to drink the entire ocean. Agastya Muni. And so Agastya Rishi, he came to see Indrajumna. And Indrajumna was in deep meditation. Then the rishis came, but Indrajumna, he didn't receive them. He didn't bow down to them. He didn't say anything. And Agastya Rishi felt offended. He's not seeing my presence, and he cursed Indrajumna to become dull like an elephant. But Indrajumna, he was a great devotee. He was such an advanced personality that if he wanted to, he could have counter-cursed. Right? This is the mystical science of spiritual life. Brahmins who have great power in Brahmin threads, they can curse others, and then those people can counter-curse, and then you have counter-curses and all these things going on. But Indrajumna, he was such a surrendered person that he thought, this is the will of the Lord. Whatever the Lord wants to have happen, that's what's going to happen. So he actually didn't counter-curse, and he became Gajendra, and he was ultimately saved by the Lord. So meditating on this, actually, when you read this in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's, in each of these stories in Bhagavatam, there's what is called the Palashruti, the benediction that you get for hearing this pastime. So one of the benedictions is that anyone who hears this automatically becomes a devotee. So you're all pure Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis now from hearing this pastime. The other one is that you get relief from bad dreams. So if anybody's struggling with bad dreams, you can just remember Gajendra Moksha and you can get relief from bad dreams. But why did we tell this story today in regards to the absolute truth, the human life, the struggling of human nature? It's because Gajendra, like all of us, we think that we're the center of the universe. We think that we're so powerful in this world. Everybody else should do what I tell them to do. I'm walking around with my chest puffed up, head held high. I'm the master of this universe. But Gajendra, what happens? He's immediately humbled. And it's stated very beautifully that God stays very far away from the proud, but the humble, he hugs very close. So in this human form of life, to understand the absolute truth, sometimes we want to force our way into transcendence. We want to come marching in, rather than humbly trying to understand what is the absolute truth. Very difficult to understand the absolute truth. Why? Because we're polluted in this, especially in this age of Kali. We're conditioned to trying to enjoy nature rather than glorify nature. Glorify that which is Krishna and that which is Krishna's. Right? What we said before, Bhoga Aishvarya Prasaktanam. Being absorbed in the Bhoga and the Aishvarya. There's no samadhi. There's no samadhi as a type of deep meditation on the Lord. So it's stated in the Puranas that when one is engaged in focusing on the pleasures of the material world, it's like looking east and God is in the west. If you're focused looking at the east, you can't see what's in the west. So this pastime is telling us not to be proud, not to rely on our own strength, not to rely on the so-called shelter of the material world, but to take shelter in transcendence. And Krishna states, Sarva Dharman Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. That Sarva Dharman Prityaja, give up all types of dharmas, all types of religion. Right? Because most religions are based on the body, tradition, and cultures. And when the body dies, then the traditions and the cultures also die with that body. But the thing that never changes is our eternal nature, that of spirit and transcendence, which is Jiver Srupahoy Krishner Nityadas, to be eternal friends, lovers. You can even be a parent of God. This morning we were hearing about Mother Yashoda and Krishna, and how Krishna, the absolute truth, a beautiful verse that says, those who fear material existence, they take shelter of the Vedas. They take shelter of Mahabharata. But this great devotee prays, I take shelter of Nanda Maharaj, the father of Krishna. Why? Because the supreme absolute truth is playing, crawling around in his courtyard. And so this morning we were hearing about Krishna and Balaram stealing butter, playing with the cows. How Krishna and Balaram, they were playing in the cow dung and the cow urine and becoming muddy, and they looked like little serpents in the mud. They would go to the homes of different gopis who had butter hanging up in pots, and they would take sticks and poke holes and get the yogurt. Krishna and Balaram, they would play with their friends. What would they do with that yogurt and butter? Give it to the monkeys. Because they're all full from eating, so they were giving it to the monkeys and other creatures, playing in the forest, roaming around. This is the absolute truth. It was eternally playing. Right? We have so many beautiful paintings around with Krishna and Balaram playing with the cowherd boys. And so the absolute truth. We're hearing about the absolute truth in regards to Gajendra, and the absolute truth playing in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj. Amazing how our mind, when great devotees, they hear about Mother Yashoda binding Krishna up with ropes, they become bewildered. Because Krishna, who's the supreme origin, the supreme energy, the supreme energetic, transcendental, how can he be tied up with ropes? But the truth is, Bhakti Badham, he becomes bound by love. And so all of Krishna's pastimes, the absolute truth's pastimes, is to show that Krishna wants our love. Sarvadharman Prityaja. Give up all types of religions, all types of traditions and cultures, and just surrender into Krishna. And Krishna says, don't fear. I'll take away all sins. Liberation will be yours. Even the great devotees, they say that those who chant Krishna, Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna,
liberation will worship you. Liberation herself will worship those who chant Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Panchakalpa Trudhyascha Kripasindhyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you kindly for your attention.